Hello everybody, and welcome to this What's New in ForNAV 4.0 webinar. I'm Jan Sillerman, and I have a couple of people that can help me today. So that's Michael Nielsen, and it is Mark who will be our presenter in just a few seconds. So just before starting out, a few housekeeping rules. So this webinar will be recorded, and you will be able to find it well, either later today or tomorrow on our YouTube channel. And should you have any questions as we go along, please don't hesitate to use the question tool in the webinar window. We will, if we decide it's relevant at this point, we'll take it right away. Alternatively, we'll take the questions at the very end. So to summarize, and I can see from the list that most of you are pretty familiar with ForNAV already, but we have these three areas. We have the converter, we have the designer, and we have the standard reports. And in 4.0, we have improvements to all these three areas, but it's definitely the converter that has been through the biggest changes here, especially with the option to convert from text to AL. And on the next slide, I also want to stress that we do support all the scenarios that are available from Microsoft with NAV and BC. So on-prem and private cloud, it's Seaside as we know it, and I've known it for many years. So text and FOB files, and on both on-prem, private cloud, and Microsoft's cloud or SaaS. So whatever infrastructure you select, we have support for AL and extensions. So the plan for today is slightly different than we are used to, because we will start with an overview of ForNAV 4.0, and that's going to take roughly around 20 minutes. Then I'll add a few comments to the pricing update that we announced last Friday. And then, of course, I hope that all of you will stay and enjoy the rest of the webinar, but the rest of the time we will spend on a more technical deep dive in ForNAV 4.0. So with that, I like to hand over to Mark.
Yep, thank you, Jan, and hi and welcome everybody. I'm always unsure whether or not I should be more nervous for the 4 p.m. webinar as I am for the 10 a.m. webinar. The 10 a.m. is always the first one, and at 4 I usually know that everything should work or should not work. But on 4 the kids are home, so I'm always a little bit afraid that one of the 5 kids I have will start shouting, and then you will all be witnessing the fact that kids do that, right? But let's see what happens today, and let's get the show on the road. If you've been to one of our What's New webinars before, you know that we always divide it into 3 areas. We have the converter, the designer, and the report pack. And today we decided that we wanted to first do a quick overview where I'm going to demo some features, and then after Jan has done the pricing, we're going to do more technical stuff, especially because if we are looking at the first topic, converter, the converter is basically where we have been working on very hard for the last 6 to 12 months. If you look at the ForNAV product, we have the converter, the designer, and the report pack. And the report pack is where my primary responsibility comes. And from a maintainability perspective, we made an executive decision that we are going to keep maintaining our report pack in Seaside. We are maintaining everything in Seaside for Business Central. And the reason why we chose Business Central is because we want to leverage some events that don't exist in NAV 2018. So we code everything in Seaside for Business Central. And then with one push of a button, we want to go to an extension, and that extension we want to publish to app source. If you want to know all about that, you can go to our YouTube channel. And last Thursday, we did a deep dive webinar on how we did that with the report pack. But we are not the only ones that are going to convert ForNAV report to extensions. Hopefully you will do too. And you may choose between on-prem and cloud. The difference between converting a ForNAV report to on-prem and cloud is that if you use ForNAV as an on-prem extension, the report will still continue to run with .NET. And if you convert a report to a cloud report, the report will use the Azure function that we created to render the report. Technically, of course, you could also use the Azure function when you are running on-prem. But if you are running ForNAV on-prem, we expect you to have enough computer power to render your own reports. And of course, that is much cheaper than us having to pay Microsoft a small fee to render the report using an Azure function. So let's see how that works and how we are using this internally. I'm first going to do a quick demo, and then after Jan's talk about pricing, we're going to do a more extensive demo on differences between cloud and on-prem and how to make your own reports and how to convert them to an extension. So this is our development system, and here we have all the ForNAV report pack objects. We have the tables, the reports, the code units, and the pages. And when I'm finished coding and we want to upload a new version of the report pack to app source, I simply filter all of my objects on the version list. I say, okay, these are all the objects I want to ship, and then I simply export all of my objects to a text file, and this is where the magic happens. The magic goes two sides. Of course, we want to go up from C side. We want to go to an extension, and we want to create the extension for app source and the one for on-premise. But we also want you to be able to use ForNAV in older versions of NAV, like NAV 2018, 16, 17, and 15. And to make that happen, we actually have a regular expression that takes away things that don't work. Like, for example, here we have the notification code units. These notification code units are simply removed from the text file if you are running ForNAV in NAV 2016 where notifications don't exist. So the next step is to run the converter, and you're all probably familiar with running the converter to convert from classic reports to ForNAV reports. And normally the first field that you populate is the web service or table definition file. And this is where, if you want to convert to an extension, you connect to an app file. App files are the little thingies that Microsoft called symbols. If I go to Visual Studio Code, and if I say AL download symbols, you get this folder with app files. And this is basically where I point to. So in this case, I have 3 app files. I have one which is an extension from Enveo, and I have my Microsoft application and my Microsoft system. Typically, you want to take a dependency on at least Microsoft application and Microsoft system, maybe a couple of other extensions as well. Microsoft application contains all of the objects like customer, item, all of the system, all of the application tables. And the system app is if you use something like the date table or the integer table, you want to use that as a dependency. And by selecting *.app in my reference, I basically tell the converter to use everything in the folder as a dependency. The next step is to take the text file that I just exported, and I want to output that to a folder. The folder is empty at the moment. Yeah, let's just verify it's empty. And then I have to tell the system to generate a cloud version or an on-prem version. And I'll demo the detail differences later. But let's now just select a cloud version. On the advanced tab, right now I don't have to do anything. But here you can choose between splitting the output file to one object or to multiple objects. And if you want to use the converter like we showed last Thursday to convert your own IP, then here you can select baseline objects to create Delta files. But in this case, I don't have Delta files, so I don't care about baseline objects. I just hit convert, and then within a few moments, it generates the extension. And internally, in our company, the only thing after converting is we add an install code unit, and we add permission XML and translations, and that's it. That's the only thing that we add to the report pack, and then we ship it to Microsoft, and we ask them to pretty please publish it to AppSource. So that's a pretty big change, and I hope you like it. And if you have some time, please start testing this. And I'll do a more deep dive demo later. So the next thing is the designer and the runtime. A couple of important changes there. The first change is also related to the AppSource story. On AppSource, there is no Windows directory with fonts, or probably there is, but we can't access it. But you still want to print special fonts, like in North America, you want to print MICR fonts to do printing. And we decided to allow font embedding, and by default, we ship the product now with the MICR font. So we license the MICR font for you, and we ship the ForNAV product with the MICR font to do check printing. And let me first quickly undo a change that I did for this morning's webinar. I'm going to quickly slash out my handled flag, otherwise my demo will be screwed up. And let me go to my Windows client. Later on, I will do more demoing in the web client, because Business Central, of course, only has the web client. But because we are still doing on-prem now, let's stick to our beloved Windows client. And I'll go to my payment journals, and I have prepared a couple of payment lines in my journal. And now I'll select my print check, and I'll do the test print. You're probably familiar with the fact that the test print of the check report is the only place in ForNAV where we actually allow you to design and preview reports without having data in the database. If you hit the test print from the check report and you say, please preview, we print access on all the places where something will print when you do the real check printing. And you can see that the MICR font is here, and it prints 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And if I go into the designer of the check report, you will see that the control that we use, MICR line, has the MICR encoding font, which is embedded into the product and shipped. So if you use this in AppSource, it will simply continue using this font. We've also made some changes on the Excel export performance and the integers on totals. And we added line type enums and global variables. I'm not going to show this today because we do want to focus as much as possible on the converter and on the AppSource story. But later on in April or in May, we're going to do a deep dive webinar on JavaScript, real life examples with JavaScript. And the reason we added the line type enums is that before we had them, you had to code against integer values. So you had to code if sales line dot type equals 2, then blah, blah, blah. And now with the line type enums, you can actually say if sales line dot type equals item, then show output true or false. So it makes it easier to go to code against option values and end up with readable code. We also decided that if you connect your report to a template report, and the template report has JavaScript, that you don't have to redefine the variables. So before this change, it was mandatory that if you wanted to reuse a piece of JavaScript from a template report, you had to redefine the same variables in your child report. And this was sometimes confusing. And we had some support tickets related to this. So we said, okay, if you have variables in your template reports, we are just going to reuse those in your child reports to avoid this complexity. The last thing is the save to HTML, which is something that I want to show you. Save to HTML is especially important in sending order confirmations in Business Central. If you send an order confirmation in Business Central, Microsoft is first running a report that generates the HTML for the email body. And after doing that, it's sending the order confirmation as PDF. And we had a couple of questions from partners asking, can we also use ForNAV to have those HTML reports? So the answer is, of course, you can do that. The HTML option is a little bit hidden in running reports from NAV. If I simply take my customer top 10 list and print, the printing to HTML is not there as an option like it was in the classic client. But if you go to Seaside, you can code against it. And I'll show you the coding example in the deep dive. For now, you'll just have to trust me that I did. I have a little code unit here, which is called HTML demo. And if I run this code unit, it executes the customer top 10 list as HTML. And if I preview the result is simply here on my D drive. Not everything in your report will smoothly convert to HTML. HTML is not the same as rendering a full report. The customer top 10 list is using chart, and charts are not supported in HTML. And you can kind of compare this to back in the days with Classic when you had HTML printing. You have to design your report specifically to run nice on HTML. And we have the same with Excel. In our report pack, we have a couple of reports which are optimized for Excel. And if you design and look at those reports, you will see that those reports are coded against Excel explicitly. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. There we have the report pack. A couple of important changes there. First of all, and this is the main reason why we decided to move our internal development to Business Central. We are leveraging the event that Microsoft exposing to replace standard Microsoft reports. And I can actually show you this in Business Central. I can go to replace reports. And here we have a list of reports. If I delete all the lines here, this is what you'll get out of the box. We have a button here, replace report selections. And now if you run the standard Microsoft trial balance, it will automatically replace it with the ForNAV trial balance. If you want to keep using a Microsoft report instead of a ForNAV report, you simply have to delete the line. Or if you have one stubborn guy in your organization and they say, okay, I don't want this ForNAV report, or I want to have my special report, you can make an exception for a specific user and then add a specific report for that user. And of course, you're free to also use this table separately from ForNAV. This is just a table that's using this event to replace a report with another report. If you download the report pack for older versions, so NAV 2018 and older, we will still show you the table and the page to replace the reports, but since the event does not exist, we cannot execute the replacement. But if you have a customer and the customer really wants to have this feature without doing the full upgrade, you can actually do the runtime upgrade where you simply replace the executables, and then all of the gizmos and things should actually start working. Then, upon popular request, we added the statement, reminder, and finance charge memo report. And let me show you where they are. The statement report is a little bit of an awkward report. It's one of the, I think, the only report where out of the box Microsoft shows the output options on the request page. So if you design this report and you look at my code and you think Marco was drunk when coding this report, this is not the case. This is actually there because Microsoft pulled a little trick to be able to print this report from the customer card. If you preview the results of the report, you will see that it actually has the ForNAV look and feel that you recognize from all of the other reports. It has been completely optimized to use the watermark, to use the ForNAV JavaScript features, etc., etc. We also did all of the reminder and finance charge memo report. If I go to reminders in my Cronus database, I have created some reminders that I have not issued yet. And if I hit the test report button, you can see that it actually shows the reminder. And if I do the preview, again, this shows the reminder in ForNAV style. The reminder is slightly different than the purchase invoice and the sales invoice. And because of those differences, we have created a separate template for the reminder and the finance charge memo. If we go to the ForNAV setup page, we've added a new template, design reminder template. One thing to remember is that if you start using this, you can design the template. But please be aware that the Cronus database doesn't have data. So as soon as I start previewing this, it will show 0 pages. And this is not because we don't like you, but this is simply that in order to preview data, we need data. And this is where the check report is different from the other reports. The check report will also always do a preview, while the other reports actually need some data in the database to do previewing. The MICR fonts on checks, I've already shown you that, and I'll deep dive into that after Jan has talked about pricing. And because we are running a little bit out of time, I'm going to, for now, skip demoing the AP2GL payments. And I'll skip a little bit to the roadmap. There's a couple of reports in the pipeline that we are preparing for you for the next release. The first one is service management reports. This is currently in preview by one of our partners in Denmark. If you want to be part of the preview program, just send an email to support@fornav.com, and then we will send you the early bits, the preview builds, and then hopefully you can help us improve the product. We're also working on a shipping label. We know that many of you have created smart labels down the line, like DHL, UPS, GLS, FedEx, all of those big shippers have their own labels. Please, if you have those labels laying around and you want to share them with us, please send us your FOB files or RDLC files or classic reports, because then we can optimize them for ForNAV and share it with everyone. And then hopefully the world will be a little bit of a nicer place. And we're also looking at creating some new financial reports. We have a list of those as well. Again, call to action. If you have any reports that you think, okay, customers are using them all the time and it would be nice to have them optimized for ForNAV, send an email to support@fornav.com and we will see if how we can prioritize them and add them to the report pack. So with that, Jan, it's up to you to talk about pricing.
Thanks, Mark. Basically, you can say that a lot has happened since we developed our current pricing some 3.5 years ago. At that time, we hardly had a designer. We definitely didn't have any report pack. So a lot has happened in those areas, and also with 4.0, significantly improvements to the converter, especially now with the option to convert to AL. At the same time, a lot of things has happened more externally. Microsoft has introduced a new pricing structure. We have seen some major currency fluctuations around the globe. And of course, the fact that we have now released ForNAV for Business Central Cloud on AppSource also called for a pricing update. And lastly, but definitely not least, we got a lot of input from partners. So if you look at this pricing overview, the structure is more or less the same as you know it today. So even though we now present it slightly differently, and again, that's based on some feedback we got that there was some unclarity about which options to choose when. Now, whether it's better or worse, I will let you judge that. But in general, you will see here that there is a small increase in prices. So today, for the full option with unlimited number of users and classic conversion, today that's 4,000 euro, and here it's 4,500 euro, and similar in US dollars. Plus, in some countries, you will see a slightly higher increase, and that is due to currency fluctuations, because we wanted to align our pricing globally. What we also did is that we formally introduced the ForNAV group license. So some of you might have heard about it or even sold it previously, but now we have decided to formally put it on our price list. So that is a license that targets larger organizations that has a need for several ForNAV licenses across a number of entities. I should also stress here that for existing customers, no matter whether they are on perpetual or on subscription, there will be no changes. So they will continue exactly as it is today. And also our model, as you know it today, where you can download the full product from our website, fornav.com/download. And what we do there is we print a watermark on the report saying this is a trial version, and basically what our license file does is remove that watermark. Now that model is unchanged, and it will also be the same when we talk about Business Central Cloud. So again, that means that everything that does not include printing reports, like for instance the upgrade from text to AL that Mark will come back to in the technical deep dive, that does not require a license. So that's basically free to use. I shall also quickly mention here that if any of you have customers on a per user license that are upgrading to Business Central, you know, Microsoft are moving from concurrent to named users, and in that process they are doubling the number of users in the license. So if you have an upgrade like that on an existing customer, please contact us, either directly me or support@fornav.com, to make sure that we get your ForNAV license updated in the same process. And then we can also introduce, and well, let me end this slide by saying that these prices are valid from May 1st of this year. So moving to the next slide, we have our BC Cloud pricing. So Mark, if I could ask you to Thank you. And this is the pricing for BC Cloud that will take effect immediately. And what we have done here is that we are simply following the microstructure 100%. So there's a price for Essentials and Premium. From a ForNAV perspective, that's the same price. And that's either a monthly price, or you can decide as a customer to pay yearly. If you do that, you basically get 2 months for free. And of course, you can say the upside for us and for you is that we save some administration if we can invoice only once a year. We have also for BC Cloud introduced a price for team members, and the main reason for that is that, as Mark also briefly touched on, when we move to our service, we basically have an Azure consumption every time a customer prints a report. Now that is included based on a fair usage in this license price, so there's no extra cost for the customer for that. But that is the reason why we are now introducing a price for team members, because we do expect them to print as well. And then if you have customers who are upgrading from Classic to Business Central Cloud, we have decided to base that on a one-time fee. So instead of having a higher price per month forever, we said let's keep the same price as for new customers. But simply have a one-time fee to pay for the Classic conversion. So I think that was the words on pricing. Now I definitely hope you will stay around, even though the next slide talks about how to learn more. I'm sure you are familiar with our website, our download site, and of course everything that is available on our YouTube channel. So this is not a closing slide. Like I said, I really hope you will stay on the call for the technical deep dive. So for that, or with that, back to you, Mark.
Yeah, let's do the cool stuff. So I want to spend most of my time on talking about the converter, and I'm going to show you how to convert a report from C-side to an extension and how to take a dependency on our bits that we have on app source. And to avoid making myself run out of time, I want to show two other things. First, I want to show you a little bit more how we decided to design the MICR algorithm for the check report. And I want to show you what code to write if you want to start using the HTML export. So let's start with the MICR algorithm. We are a Danish company, and we get great help and feedback and input from our North American partners, but we don't have the answer to all of the questions, especially around algorithms that are required to print MICR numbers. So in order to avoid having to modify our core solution every time somebody comes up with a change to the algorithm, we decided to leverage events. So as I showed you in the report, in our check model table, which is the base table for our check, we have added a field which is called MICR line. And this is populated from the table using the set MICR line function. This is basically populating the MICR text field, and we raise an event. And if somebody decides to handle the event, we don't execute our own code. Currently, our own code is not very sophisticated. Our own code just populates the MICR line with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We do hope that we will get some valuable feedback that this is not a smart algorithm and it should be something else instead. But in order not to have to go to Microsoft to change our business logic every time that we run into this problem in AppSource, what we can actually do is either in C-side or in an extension, we can create a new code unit. And in that new code unit, we can actually subscribe to this event. And this event can contain the business logic that handles the MICR algorithm. And in this case, I'm setting the value to 9999, which is not a lot smarter than the first algorithm, but at least it's different enough so you can see the result. And I set my handled flag to true, so I'm telling the core that it doesn't have to do anything. So now if I go back to my payment journal and I decide to print a check again, I should get 999 instead of 12345, right? We are looking for feedback. If you are currently using our report pack and you have been making changes to the report pack and you go like, oh my God, what if we go to Business Central and I can't touch Mark's code anymore, and I don't want to start cloning the code and creating my own report pack. If you want us to add more event publishers, please send an email to support@fornav.com and we'll see if it's a valid event request, and we'll put the event into the base app, so you don't have to clone our report just to make a very small change. The next thing I wanted to show you is the HTML demo. If you want to save our ForNAV reports to HTML, you will have to use the save as command. In this case, I have declared our report as a variable, and then I have designed a file variable and a stream variable, and I'm creating a new file, opening a stream and moving the HTML into the stream. You may say, why are you not using ForNAV customer top 10 list .save as HTML? This is prevented by Microsoft because Microsoft only supports saving Word documents as HTML. Microsoft does not support RDLC in combination with HTML. And behind the scenes, we are using the RDLC section to store the report format. And if you simply do the save as HTML, you will get an error message. So this is just a small tip if you want to start using HTML to do this. And of course, as I demoed, HTML might not work as expected out of the box immediately. And in some reports, or actually probably in a lot of reports, you will probably have to go into the report and make changes to make the HTML look like you expect. Okay, so now with that out of the way, we can dive more into doing more of the converter demo. And the first thing I want to show you is the difference between converting ForNAV report to on-prem and creating the same report as a cloud report. And when I do the second demo, when we demo the cloud version, I'm also going to show you how to create a dependency on our app source bits and how to make that work in combination with the designer and saving custom report layouts, and what's the difference between cloning a report and saving a layout. So we actually have a real life case. We have a customer in North America who is currently running ForNAV on AppSource. You can actually say it's a very early adopter because we are only on AppSource for 2 weeks and we already have the first people using it. This customer wanted to have their sales invoice grouped on item category code. And currently, to group sales lines on a field, the only way to make that work is by cloning the report, because we have to change the, and the sorting is done in the data set. Happily, fortunately, we can actually sort on fields which are not keys anymore. We are leveraging that in a lot of the ForNAV reports. But for now, we cannot do that from the designer. That will come in the future. In the future, we will actually do everything in ForNAV, but currently you have to do this in the dataset designer. So being a Navision dinosaur, I have prepared my report in Seaside. I have tested my report in Seaside and I was happy with the result. And now this customer wants to do it in AppSource. So my next step is to convert my report to an extension. So I'm exporting my object to a text file. I'm always using the same text file. I don't want my D drive to flood with files. And the next thing I do is actually run the converter, and I can export my file to my AL file. I can do this directly, so I can choose my on-prem and I can convert my report. If I convert my report, I will get my files in my AL folder, which is currently still populated with other stuff. Apologize for that. Let's do this again. And now I can copy these files to a new extension. But of course, I can also go into Visual Studio Code and I can say Ctrl-Shift-P, AL Go, and then create AL Project 10. And what I can do now is I can say reveal in Explorer. I can copy my folder to my ForNAV converter. And if I now run the ForNAV converter again, let's do that. Now the ForNAV converter just drops the files into my project. We create one AL file with two objects. The first object that we create in the AL file is a .NET object, and the .NET object will create a reference to the .NET assembly. In this case, it's ForNAV version 4 and then build number 1596. And the type is called NAV report 50,000.
I think Mark forgot to mention his dog when he mentioned his kids, but I'm sure he'll be right back.
The dog is actually normally when he goes out for a walk.
Go on, Mark. It's okay.
Yeah. The reason why we declare the .NET inside of the report is that you may want to run different versions side by side, and each report will have its own connection to our DLL. And this allows you to have specific DLLs for specific versions if you run into issues where, in rare cases, you may want to create different ForNAV reports. Then we have the report itself. And the report is using an RDLC layout, which is stored in the layouts folder, and it's pointing to an RDLC folder. And here you can see that we have the same code as you are normally seeing in ForNAV reports. We have the ForNAV code, and we have all the .NET things that we always have in the report. So let's see what the same thing looks like when we convert into the cloud report. And in the cloud project, we're also going to fix a dependency, because you can see that I've converted a ForNAV report that takes a dependency on the ForNAV core. We have the load watermark, and we have all the bits that we have in every ForNAV report. So it's important also to understand how to fix those dependencies. So instead of converting to on-prem, I'm going to convert to cloud, and I'm going to revert back to our D/AL, and I'm going to select cloud. So now again, I'm getting the report as an AL file, but if I now go into my layouts, I get a docx extension instead of an RDLC extension. The difference between on-prem and cloud is that on-prem we still use RDLC, and in the cloud we use the Word part to store ForNAV report definition. For this webinar, I have prepared a project in Visual Studio Code. Let me open that from my recent files, invoice with grouping. And if I go into my project, I have my launch.json file, and the launch.json file is pointing to my Microsoft Cloud Sandbox. So let's open the Cloud Sandbox. If I go to my Internet Explorer, here I have my Business Central tenant. This is our real Business Central tenant, so this is not our sandbox. And in our real tenant, I have installed the ForNAV extension from AppSource. So if I go to extensions in Business Central, I should get a list of all the Microsoft extensions that are installed. And I also get a list of the ForNAV extensions. We have the ForNAV core, and we have the customizable report pack. If I now go to my sandbox will contain the same extensions as I have in my real tenant. And I want to start using my sandbox to play around with the report and to see if the result is what I expect before putting this report into my live environment. So I already had a sandbox, so I'm just going to open it. If you don't have a sandbox yet, you have to create one. Or if you messed it up, you want to delete it and to create a new sandbox from scratch. And as soon as you have created a sandbox, you can actually go into Visual Studio Code and connect it. And it will actually connect your VS Code to the correct sandbox by using the Azure Active Directory credentials. The next thing I have to do is I have to go into my app.json file and I have to create a dependency on the ForNAV app source bits. And the way I do that today, and we'll make that easier in the future, but today, the way I do that is I go into my extensions, and here we have another list of extensions, and here we have the customizable report pack. And if I go to view, you will see that the app ID is this. This app ID will never change until I retire, and probably not after that. And we have a publisher, a version, and a name, and we have the same for the core. The core also has an ID that will never change, and a version, and a publisher, and a name. And you simply copy that into the dependencies. And after that, the report will understand that it has to work together with the bits that are already there on AppSource. You can see that VS Code is actually warning me that the item category code is not a key. Yes, I know, and I don't care. But if I go to my VAT amount lines code, I have a reference to our code unit. If I use the go-to-definition function in VS Code, you will actually see that it starts thinking, and it actually downloads my DAL file, DAL file from AppSource, and it shows me directly from AppSource the code unit with the source code. So all of our source code that we publish on AppSource is available, and you can debug through it, except for one little thing. We have a reference to our core, which is the ForNAV report code unit. If I do a go-to definition on this, it actually shows nothing. And this is not because we don't like you, but this is storing information about our Azure endpoint and all of that stuff, which we decided not to publish inside of our extension. So the next thing is to test the report. And to test the report, you can simply say AL publish. And this AL publish will actually execute the report in the sandbox with a full debugging experience. So you can debug the code until you're happy and see if everything works. And then once everything works, publishing the report on the real tenant is a little bit different. You cannot publish the report on the real tenant by publishing it from VS Code. After the publishing on the sandbox, you will create an app file. And this app file, if I go into my real Business Central, If I go into extensions, I have a menu option here, which is called Upload Extension. And this is what you should use after you have tested your report. You can actually upload an extension, and this points to your app file. After uploading, it will automatically figure out that it has a dependency on the ForNAV app source bits, and it will figure out that it is installed. And then you will get a warning or a message that you should look at the deployment status. And the deployment status will tell you whether or not the upload has completed. And you can see by this list that during our testing, I failed and I failed and I failed until I completed. And I hope that you have the same experience, that from failing comes learning, and with learning comes completion, and then you'll get the completed report. That doesn't mean that for every report change that you have to clone our report as your own extension. You can actually do a lot with just modifying the report. If I go into my Business Central and I go into my replace reports, you will see the same list as I had in the Windows client. So if I execute the trial balance report, it will not run the standard Microsoft report, but it will run the ForNAV report. Then we have the same with customer top 10 list and vendor top 10 list. And let's see what happens if we run the vendor top 10 list. If I just preview the report, we should get a list of our most popular vendors with the charts, just like we have in Seaside. And then after that, let's see if we can make some changes and see where those changes are stored. You can actually make quite a substantial amount of changes without having to do anything in Visual Studio Code. So the result that I have on my screen looks the same as we have in Seaside. As Jan said, we will have the trial version watermark until we pay for our license. So now, instead of running the report, we are just going to design it. And the designer pops up a message that it will open the designer, and I will open the download in my designer. And here I get my report and I can make changes. I can make a simple change, like let's change the font size color into red. But because ForNAV allows you to do the full table view in your report, you can actually drag in all the data fields from the vendor table into your report without having to go into Visual Studio Code. You can also go into the report and you can start declaring variables. And from declaring the variables, you can actually go into writing JavaScript. So a lot of changes that you want to do to reports will not force you to go into Visual Studio Code. And I should be able to demo to preview my report, but currently, for whatever reason, that does not work. But in case my report is saved, I can go into report layouts, custom report layouts. And every time that you change a report, a new line will be created in the custom report layouts table. So my report did save, and my report did save a row in my custom layout selection. And this is basically where you start making changes. And this is also where you can use the sandbox. You can make changes in the sandbox. And when you're happy with the change, you can simply export your custom report layout selection and import it back into your real tenant. So this is what I had to show you today. I hope you like it. I don't know if you have any questions or any feedback. Jan, do you have any questions?
Nope, we do not.
Any feedback from the audience? Feedback like, ooh, this is cool, or feedback like, ooh, that must have been a lot of work.
No questions, no feedback.
Okay, cool.
I hope the sound goes through.
Exactly. Okay, if there's no questions, then I would like to thank you for paying attention and hopefully see you again in a future webinar.
Yeah, and thanks to you, Mark.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.